nuclear weapons, I don't think, could end the conflict tomorrow. I mean, they could end the world tomorrow, certainly. But nuclear or threat of nuclear attack has really been in evidence throughout the 3 years, very much coming from the Russians. In fact, both President Putin and also some of his close supporters of nuclear weapons, these are battlefield nuclear weapons into Ukraine virtually every day of the last 3 years, and nothing has come to fruition. On the other side, President Zelensky a number of times has stated that he believes that had Ukraine still maintained its nuclear weapons, which it gave up after the Budapest Memorandum in 1996, the war would never come about. And I think he is probably right there. With the way that Donald Trump is operating at the moment, seeming to favor the Russians more than the Europeans, the key thing is that the American nuclear weapons have, along with the British and French, prevented nuclear war since the end of the Second World War. Now, with the Americans out of the picture, that in a way gives an imbalance and would further give the advantage to Putin. However, the French have recently said that they would be happy to use their nuclear weapons as an umbrella over Europe, and the UK has a similar capability. Although Britain and France's nuclear weapons, are nowhere near the capability of the Russians, even Putin knows that if Britain and France did use their nuclear weapons, that would be the end of Russia anyway. So I think this is another strange statement emanating from President Trump and his team. I think the nuclear issue is not relevant. What is relevant is trying to secure a ceasefire and a peace acceptable to the Ukrainians as quickly as possible. There are two types of nuclear weapons: strategic nuclear weapons. These are intercontinental ballistic missiles with multiple nuclear warheads on the end. Britain has Trident submarines with the Trident missile in it, and these have up to 18 to 20 warheads. One of these intercontinental ballistic missiles can destroy a whole city. Now, the Americans and the Russians, the British and the French have these similar sort of missiles. And, if you put it all together, there are more intercontinental ballistic missiles than are required to destroy the whole of the planet. Now, this all sounds very dramatic, but at the moment there is a balance. We also have what we call tactical nuclear weapons. These are much smaller. They are launched from aircraft or smaller missiles. They have a yield between 2 and 10 kilotons. That's 2 to 10,000 tons of conventional explosives, and enough to destroy big columns of tanks, airfields, this sort of area. So in the worst case, you could flatten a city, and the smaller ones, flatten an airfield, as it were. So they range, but in total, there are enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world. Well, there's still quite a lot of secrecy around this. We know that the Americans have their Iron Dome system, which is designed to take these things out. And I think a lot of people have seen what the Israelis have with their Iron Dome system to take out missiles. It's a challenging science and technology for certain, because intercontinental ballistic missiles go many thousands of miles, up into space. But undoubtedly, both the Americans and the Russians do have technology. One expects that the Russian technology is rather less sophisticated than the Americans, but I don't think there's any assurance that they are completely foolproof and they will take them all down. We know the Americans, in working with the British and possibly the French as well, are looking to improve this type of system, but it's untested. So one never knows completely how successful they will be. And the assumption must be that in a global exchange, enough nuclear weapons would get through on either side to create devastation. I think the world should take solace in the fact that there hasn't been a nuclear war since the Second World War for 75 years. It's not since 1945 when the only nuclear bombs were dropped. I think everybody in power, be it in Russia, in China, North Korea, Washington or London, knows that a nuclear conflict would be disastrous for the planet. And that is why I think it has kept the peace. It is concerning, I think, when we see the dynamics and the world order changing, particularly with some of the activities and some of the comments coming out of President Trump, which is destabilizing the world order. It is a concern. But I am still confident that there are enough checks and balances in place that a rogue person or a rogue state could not create a global nuclear war leading to Armageddon. It is a worst case possibility, but we've had a lot of challenging times in the last 75 years, and it hasn't happened. And despite the fact of what we're seeing in Ukraine at the moment, one has to just look at what the various protagonists are trying to achieve, and nuclear war would achieve none of their objectives. So I still think that it is an unlikely scenario for any activity in Ukraine to develop into a global nuclear conflict leading to what's generally termed Armageddon. It is true that if Trump withdraws America's nuclear capability from the West, then in theory, Russia has a significant advantage. But even just taking the French and the British nuclear weapons, although vastly smaller and less capable than the Russians, there's still enough to destroy most of Russia. And President Putin knows that. The use of smaller tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine, I don't think would achieve anything particularly. These are weapons that could just take out an airfield or large armored formations. So it seems to be part of Trump's extreme rhetoric to try and rush into some peace deal so that he can claim his vocations that he would end the war in 24 hours. I think it's not credible. I don't think the nuclear challenge is something that is going to change the war in Ukraine at all. And let's hope that President Trump can focus on trying to bring about a just and lasting ceasefire and peace through his negotiations rather than threats of nuclear attack. Putin and his team in the Kremlin have threatened, I haven't counted them, but it must be many hundreds of threats. And, when you threaten something and don't do it, it diminishes in capability. So, if Putin was going to use nuclear weapons, he'd have used them on day one. He hasn't. He knows. I mean, the whole basis of the nuclear scenario is mutually assured destruction mad. And that's not what Putin wants to try and recreate the old Soviet Union. He sees himself as the modern day Peter the Great. If he has Russia destroyed by nuclear attack, then that is completely against his psyche, however distorted it might be. So, I think it's completely uncredible, and one just has to look at what has or hasn't happened over the last 3 years. I personally believe that Russia can't use its tactical nuclear weapons anyway. These are smaller missiles and bombs off aircraft, because even with America sitting on the fence, I'm sure the capabilities that the rest of the NATO European countries have would be able to take these missiles down before they're actually fired. So I think that the nuclear issue is a non-issue.